Welcome into Newhouse Afternoon, everybody. Our last show of the semester. Went by fast.
Yeah, no kidding.
Only a few shows this semester because we're doing every other week versus every week semesters prior. But happy to have a couple of special guests on here today. First of all, Max Gifford, Beyer, and Nico Horning here on the 2 o'clock hour on this Tuesday afternoon. A lot to cover Syracuse football-wise, of course, but we want to start off the show today by bringing on the host of NFL Red Zone, Scott Hanson, a Syracuse alum as well. Scott, you got us?
Oh, man.
Good,
I mean, does that not just fire you up hearing that?
Always. Every time. Scott, thanks for doing this. Appreciate you jumping on here. Before we get into, too much football discussion, obviously we had the chance of spending some time together this past summer at NBC for the Olympics, and you had the opportunity to jump on the Gold Zone. And how different was that experience compared to the Red Zone? And maybe has it been easier this year doing the NFL stuff now that you've done other sports that you've had to really gear up for over the summer?
Question. It was a thrill. It was great to be a part of NBC Sports and to cover the Olympics. Obviously, the worldwide extravaganza that the Olympic Games are, and from a world-class city like Paris, it was fantastic. It was a heck of a challenge because preparing for Red Zone, I just go into granular detail about it is or how the rosters have changed. I don't need to familiarize myself week by week with the rules of football. Whereas preparing for the Olympics, I had to know the athletes, I had to know the competition, I needed to know the rules of the sport. Who knew that fencing you go up to 45 and what does overtime look like in water polo, and how do the judges score the tumbling passes on the gymnastics floor exercise? So it was kind of a double need requirement for preparation, and I hope I did it justice. The folks at NBC Sports were fantastic in terms of the research teams, and if I had a question about something, I could get an answer within 10 or 15 seconds, whether it was prior to going on the air or live in the moment. And look, people said that Gold Zone was one of the biggest successes of this Olympics, and I think our whole team was very gratified by that.
Scott, with that double need for preparation, learning all the rules for these sports, I'm going to put you on the spot a little here. What's the hardest sport that was hard to learn for the Olympics?
Hardest sport to learn for the Olympics. Handball was kind of a weird one for me. Let me think. Fencing was interesting because fencing, they have a replay system, and if you think the NFL replay system can kind of drive you wild sometimes in terms of I see this and they see that, and it slows the game down and whatnot. Fencing, we would get to championship points, gold medal points in some fencing matches, and they would have 8 reviews back to back to back. Picture, you picture fencing, right? The one fencer lunges at the other one, and there's a touch, and it seems simultaneous, and one of them rips off their helmet to celebrate, and they go, no, we got to check it to see who really did touch first, because it goes within 1,000th of a second. And we had some matches that we were going crazy. We were like, come on, guys. I mean, at some point, we just you got to call a winner here. That was a little bit odd. What other ones? There were some of the speed cycling events in the velodrome were interesting because they're like, this race is going to last 22 seconds, the entire race. And they're going around the track. It's not like, okay, it's just a straight run like you would have in track and field. That was kind of odd to try and feel that, because you could go back to the venue and this race could be 8 minutes long. This race could be 22 seconds long. And you really had to be on point to be able to prime the audience to say, okay, hey, we're at the start line here. Don't turn your head. And we're not switched because this is 22-second race. It's going to be over with. It's a sprint. Or the starter gun goes off and they say, okay, they're off at the velodrome, but this is about an 8-minute race. So we're not going to see the gold medal moment for another 8 minutes. Let's cut back to the swimming pool, or let's go back over to track and field. It was a lot. There was a lot. But like I said, the NBC Sports, they had an expert at every sport, there was someone assigned in the research department to be an absolute expert at an individual game or sport, and they were sharp. They were sharp. We had a I don't mean to keep talking about this too much, but we had a shooting event where there was a circumstance where they didn't use instant replay, and yet the NBC cameras absolutely showed that the one female shooter, it was the gold medal match, I believe, female shooter hit one of the clay pigeons, but the officials didn't notice it with their naked eye. So then we had to learn, well, they don't use instant replay in this sport. We're like, how can you not use instant replay? But it's ancient, and it goes back to, hey, there's 3 judges, and if they don't see it with the naked eye, it doesn't matter. And yet everybody has the television feed available, and it was like, well, there you go. Kind of like an NFL coach when something happens in, like, maybe they miss a face mask call in an NFL game. You can't review that. You can't add a face mask penalty by instant replay review or a coach's challenge, and then they put it up on the big screen in the stadium, and the head coach is like looking at the official and then pointing up to the big screen saying, "It's right there. How could you not throw the flag?" That was kind of weird, and that was for a gold medal. And these people have prepared for 4 years to get to that moment. And especially in the lesser-known sports, it's not only the highest level at the Olympics, but it's the highest level that possibly can be in some of those more arcane sports. So that was unfortunate, but we needed to communicate it to the audience why this woman didn't win the gold medal, or why the match wasn't at least extended, because they couldn't use the instant replay that we all just saw that she actually did hit the clay. And sorry, we'll see you in 4 years again.
Yeah, seems like there should be some instant replay taken away from fencing and given to shooting.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I would agree. Oh, that's a funny moment, and it's crazy the gap in between events. You just mentioned it, Scott. 4 years. I mean, these athletes prepare forever to get their seconds of fame, and NFL, you kind of know what to expect year in, year out. You're going to have newcomers, you're going to have guys that don't have a great season, but it's a whole nother level, it seems like, when it comes to the Olympics and obviously broadcasting as well. So kind of bringing it back to the NFL a little bit before we get into some Syracuse talk here. When you talk about experts and your preparations, right, there's a lot of play-by-play broadcasters. They're preparing for one game. They have the storylines. You, on the other hand, you're kind of in charge of most of the NFL games for a given Sunday. What's the week look like for you going into those preparations for each game?
Yeah, so here we are. We're speaking on a Tuesday. Right. Tonight, my email inbox will receive about a 100-page packet from the NFL media researchers that kind of puts a button on week 11 and looks forward here to week 12. I'll start taking that either tonight or tomorrow morning. I'll start taking that document, go through it, and then I start creating my own spreadsheets. I do quarterbacks, kickers, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, anyone who would probably touch the football in a regular time. I want to know all the leaders, all the different trends recently, turnovers, all the defensive statistics that matter, quarterback pressures, sacks, interceptions, tacklers, those type of things. And I just put everything down in a document, and then I whittle it down throughout the week, where this upcoming weekend I've got, 7 games in the early window, 3 games in the late window, and I'll have one page boiled down, read dozens, if not hundreds of pages on each game, but I'll take one page and say, these are the facts or notes or things that I think I'll be able to share with the audience, or that I hope to be able to share with the audience to add some context and flavor to the game. But then once we get live in the middle of the 7 hours of commercial-free football, the action will dictate what I impart. You guys are all broadcasters. You've done play-by-play before, and going into a live event, you can't just say, well, because I prepared this, this is what the story the audience is going to be told. No, the game is the story, and you go to add context and add perspective as the game action allows. It's a little bit like, I always say this, it's a little bit like being in college and having your professor say, okay, we're at the end of the semester here, we got the final exam, and the final exam is an essay exam, and here's a list of 10 essay questions, The exam will be on Friday, like this is Monday or whatever. The exam will be on Friday. Here's a list of 10 essay questions that represent everything we've learned this semester. 3 of them will be on the exam for time's sake. Well, what do you do? Which 3 do you study? If you're a diligent student, you study all 10. And so that's what I do. I dive into every game, every possible thing. And some of these games are going to be, it'll be 35-7, a blowout, and you're not going to talk about that much on Red Zone. But then the game that does go 28-28 in the final 60 seconds with the quarterback, needing a touchdown or needing any type of a score to win the game, you're ready and prepared for the context and perspective, and hopefully take your enthusiasm to a certain level that makes for a good viewing experience for the audience. So, yeah, it's immersive. I'll start tonight, and then I won't stop until Saturday night around midnight. I get to sleep, and then the alarm rings at 4:30 a.m. on Sunday morning, and off to the studio, and there we go.
Wow.
So, Scott, you talk about these niche statistics that you need. And, last Sunday we saw the kicker fiasco. It seemed like almost every kicker, Justin Tucker included, was missing field goals and extra points. And you need those stats, right? You have researchers that research, who's the made the most completions in their NFL career by kicker. But what's something else that goes on behind the scenes of Red Zone that viewers would be surprised to know?
Let's see. I think one of the surprising things, well, there's probably 2 things. One, I guess social media has kind of outed this over the course of the 16 years we've been doing the show. But the background, when you see me on camera saying, "Hi, everyone, welcome to NFL Red Zone presented by DraftKings Sportsbook, Scott Hanson here," the background behind me is fake.
Yeah,
it's green screen.
When I learned that, my heart kind of broke a little bit.
That's like finding out that Santa Claus isn't real.
Right.
It's like my life is a lie, is what people say when I post something from the studio on my raw camera phone that obviously doesn't digitize the green screen itself. And people are like, "What? It's fake." And then usually they say, "I can't believe you sit in a green room the whole time and aren't crazy at the end." Well, I've grown accustomed to it, and B, who says I'm not crazy? So that's one thing that's different. The other thing would be this: in the studio, when you watch Red Zone, the viewing experience is, I understand, it's very thrilling for the audience because it's nonstop action. We can cut to anything at any given moment. Every time I switch to a game and you hear my voice rise to a certain level, you think, hey, a 50-yard touchdown is coming, or a pick 6 just happened, or whatever it is, right? So I think people sitting at home think, oh, if I was in that studio with Scott, it would be crazy. It'd be wild. It'd be all. The studio is actually very quiet. Very quiet. There's limited number of people in the studio. I have a researcher and a spotter right next to me. Tim Galanians, Brian Larrabee, my right-hand man. I've been with them for years. Everything needs to be fairly contained and quiet, A, for concentration's sake, and B, because my microphone can be open or hot, as we say, at any given time, and there can't be any ambient noise that gets in there that would distract the audience. So I think that's something different that fans wouldn't understand, is that if you came into the studio, and we have guests come in, we had big group of U.S. Marines, servicemen and women that came in last week. It was great to see them. They're all, shooting video and whatnot with their phones, but they're really surprised as to how quiet it is, other than my voice when I need to interject or transition from a game to game. So those are 2 things that I think that people would find interesting.
The thing I've learned so far is Scott is so smart because he's trying to use buzzwords like homework and essays compared to, hosting Red Zone, so that nobody ever takes his job and ever wants to do this ever. So you have so much homework, you mentioned, to do on all these different NFL teams per week. I don't know if you've done a lot of your homework on Syracuse football right now, but they're doing pretty good right now in the first year of the Fran Brown era. As somebody who played here at Syracuse, I guess in the first year of the Fran Brown era, what's impressed you the most?
A proud Syracuse alum, a proud Syracuse football letterman from back in the day. I'm one of the old heads that goes back to the day when we were, in my 2 years, back in the day when you played 12 total games, right? You play 11 in the regular season and then make a bowl game, 12 games. Our team went 10-2 my junior year and 10-2 my senior year. and very, very proud of that. We went to 4 bowl games, won all 4 bowl games when I was with the team. So I'm very proud and very, very excited for Coach Fran and this new era of Syracuse football. I had lunch with Coach Fran when he came out here to Los Angeles to kind of make a West Coast swing to meet some of the Syracuse alums and boosters and whatnot that he wanted to make sure we felt really close touchstone to the program. And then his system going in there, already bowl eligible, every win to this point forward, stacks maybe a nicer bowl game on top. Kyle McCord already breaking records, season-long records in passing history in Syracuse, which there have been some good quarterbacks that come through. LaQuint Allen looks like he's an NFL back. And then a number of different receivers that can do some things with the ball in their hands. I love it. I love it. I thought it was a great win last week. I watched the Cal game coming out west, and granted, that's a bizarre, the nature of the NCAA and shifting conferences and whatnot. It was a bizarre matchup to a degree in mid-November, but great to see him keep stacking wins. And UConn will be a nice test this week, but hey, get another win, and then you know what? Finishing with the Miami Hurricanes in a season that they think is going to be a playoff season for them, man, you ball up a fist and throw it for all you can take on a highly ranked team like that. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to see not only how this year resolves itself, but what Coach Fran does in the years to come at Syracuse.
Hey, the travel's been a big adjustment for everyone, and that Miami game at the end of the month should be pretty cool. So, Nico Horning, Dylan Beyer, Max Gifford here with the NFL Red Zone host, Scott Hanson, wrapping things up. Scott, speaking of coaches and the UConn game this weekend, Coach Mack's going to be inducted into the Ring of Honor here in the Dome. I don't know, maybe you can describe what impact he had on the program, and if you have any, if you've had any conversations with people around him that you can say is of significance for SU football.
I was very blessed to have 2 years under Coach Mack, my freshman and sophomore years, 2 years under Coach P when he took over and had a great run with Syracuse as well. Coach Mack was, one of a kind football coach, one of a kind human being. A leader. He was a leader, and he led with his heart, with passion, with enthusiasm. He brought it every day. There was I could use another hour to tell you stories. I'll just tell you one that showed how smart he was as a leader. So, believe it or not, football players don't always love going on a football field. Sometimes late in the season, even if your team's winning and whatnot, the middle of the week practice when you're balancing classes and everything else like that, you twisted your ankle or you got a thick, deep bruise in your thigh or something. You feel sluggish, and you gotta really ramp yourself up. Well, it's easy for college kids to lose focus sometimes. So Coach Mack he had this device, I guess I would call it, that he used to focus everyone at the beginning of practice. We would stretch, right? First thing you do, go out there, do some cross fields, limber up, break a little sweat, and then get into the rows for stretching every day, right? That was the matter of course. Coach Mack would stretch with us, do all the same stretches we were doing, and okay, fine, he's doing the same thing. But then in the middle of it, he would yell out the name of a town, wherever, wherever, Stores, Connecticut, wherever, or, Rochester, Michigan, my hometown. He would yell out a hometown of someone on the team, and you had to be paying attention, and you would give him a woo or a yeah or whatever else in response, as if you were enthusiastic about doing it. And he would only do 2 or 3 every single day, but if you paid attention, he would go through the entire team, and if he yelled out, Buffalo, New York, there'd be 8 guys that would yell out, woo, hey, that type of thing. But he was so smart because you knew that your hometown could be called out, and if you missed it, the rest of the team would be like, whoa, where are you at? Where's your head at? Your head is not here, right here, right now. Just so smart to get you tuned in to focus on a practice and to make you feel like an individual as part of a team, to call out your hometown. I thought that was so brilliant. I don't know where he came up with it, but that was one little tiny example of how Coach Mack would do everything he could to build a team, galvanize a group of young men, for one cause to go out and win and represent the university as well as we could. Love Coach Mack and always will.
I can only imagine even that style 20, 30 years later now with the generation of social media and phones and attention spans. That's a great way to, keep everyone kind of oriented on the field. So, anyways.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Well, Scott, thanks for the time. Appreciate you jumping on here. And go Orange, and good luck the rest of the way here in NFL season. Love watching you as always every Sunday.
Well, I appreciate you, Nico. Thanks for having me on. Dylan, Max, have a great rest of the day, and go Orange, baby. Let's see how this season plays out.
Go Orange,
Go
Scott.
Orange.
Thanks so much.
Let's see how it plays out the rest of the way. Scott Hanson here on ESPN Syracuse and Q Sports Talk. We thank him so much for jumping on. We'll step aside for just a few minutes, and Syracuse basketball, Syracuse football talk coming up, and then another guest coming up in about 10 minutes or so. It'll be Kenny Albert, and we'll be back here in just a second on ESPN Syracuse and Q Sports Talk.
Don McPherson joins Brian Higgins.
Thank you.
The ad we just had said Dick McPherson.
During that?
Yeah, just a.
Oh, you mean right now? Yeah.
Yeah, it's McPherson because there's no fear in McPherson.
No fear.
That's what the family's motto is.
Dylan, I love that question, by the way.
That was a really good question.
Thank you. I'm always
Sorry, I
so
didn't know
interested.
if you wanted to ask another.
I was
No,
I was afraid we were getting into Catalan territory.
I know.
People forget
That was
that.
smart.
People for.
Sure. Okay.
Sure.
I think do you guys want to bring him on during the next break then?
Yeah, we can
Can we
bring
just
one
talk for a
during
couple
break.
minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can bring on.
That'll give us a few minutes here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Jordan, you got that? Okay. During the next commercial, we can just, if you want to bring him on, we can tell him that we're going to come back from break in a minute. We can start talking. Cool. Sweet. Awesome. Cool. So you're good here?
Yeah.
Sweet. So I guess we'll try to wrap it
So we can wrap at
2:30 or so.
at 2:30.
Okay.
We could do
Or a couple minutes later if you want.
yeah. It's just quickly feelings about football
Yeah.
and then
No, whatever.
worries about.
I will answer
basketball.
whatever. That was a great story, by the way, by Scott, I thought.
Yeah.
No, it was awesome. All right, Dylan, how are we feeling about the Jets? They made their
Yes,
they
yes,
fired
yes.
someone.
Yeah, so now that they fired Joe Douglas, Aaron Rodgers, it's the first quarterback, head coach, manager that we've seen in the NFL. So it only can get better from here. Maybe he'll play wide receiver the next game. Who knows what we'll see from Aaron Rodgers next.
Said Aaron Rodgers will play wide receiver?
I think tight end.
I don't know. But I do can you guys admit it might be time to put Tyrod Taylor
No.
in?
No, absolutely
No,
not.
because
Why
if the
are we still having this
Jets,
conversation?
Jets win out, they could make the playoffs, Dylan. There's still a chance for us,
and Tyrod
Dylan.
and Tyrod Taylor's the answer?
Yeah, right.
Is Aaron Rodgers?
Yes.
Oh, he's
Better
the
than-
He'll find his
answer?
stride.
Better than
He'll-
Tyrod.
Okay.
I mean, we didn't ask him, but
Okay.
I mean, it's a basic question. Is Tommy DeVito the answer for
Well,
the Giants?
yes. Right now, where the Giants are, you're forced to make that switch. They're not making that switch because Aaron Rodgers is the shot caller. Aaron Rodgers is
How did
the
Rodgers
bench
do last week,
Aaron
by the way?
Rodgers. He actually did well because, as we all know, he's on my fantasy team.
Yeah.
But again, begs the question that I've asked before: would you rather have a good individual quarterback performance, but your team still lose, or a bad
It's not
individual
Rodgers'
quarterback?
fault.
Of course.
But you got to play three sides of the ball to win football games.
Ready? If they keep losing, they're going to say, but wait, we fired our head coach. We fired our general manager.
Oh, you got the book?
Whose fault can this be?
Have you read it yet?
I have read it.
You did?
Mhm.
Oh,
Aaron
perfect.
Rodgers.
Yeah.
I have not yet.
I have.
I've read a little bit, but I haven't nowhere near finishing it.
I'll call you. I'll call you the fraud.
No.
Freshly out of the seal.
No. So we'll do one break with him.
Sounds good.
During the segment as well. Sorry, I just saw your text about the last one.
It's fine. I think we can each make just a quick point on this.
Sweet.
ESPN 97.7 and 100.1. Watch live on QSportsTalk.com. Tomorrow's broadcasting stars today. Broadcasting live from the campus of Syracuse University. This is Newhouse Afternoon.
Welcome back to Newhouse Afternoon. I'm Dylan Beyer with Max Gifford, Nico Horning. Well, it's a great time to be a Syracuse fan, not only on Syracuse men's basketball, but also Syracuse football, coming off of what I'm calling the best game of the season. In Cal, they won 33-25. This was I'm getting some looks between Max and Nico.
I would say potentially I could agree with the best well-rounded game of the season.
That's what I mean.
But I would honestly go a step further and say I think it's the most well-rounded game since Georgia Tech. I don't think it's the most well-rounded game of the season.
I was going to say Georgia Tech as well. I think Georgia Tech and Cal are the biggest wins in their own ways. First off, Georgia Tech, that was here in the Dome.
Yes.
Also, they were a ranked team. Cal, not a ranked team. Still a great team, by the way. I didn't realize how good they've been. They've kind of flown under the radar a little bit, but also a big road win.
Well, that win against Syracuse, or that loss against Syracuse, was their biggest lopsided loss of the year. They'd only lost by a combined 9 points, then you lose by 8, so they almost doubled their amount of points in the losing margin.
So to answer your question, I think they were both a huge win or best win of the season in their own aspect.
Okay.
So that's how I'm looking at it.
I look at it as I called for it. Well, I called the BC game to be a full offense-fledged game. That game was very disappointing, but we've moved on from that already.
Thank goodness we weren't on the show for that.
Thank goodness. But coming off this Cal game, LaQuinn Allen 2 touchdowns, Meeks a touchdown. You had all of guys going all cylinders.
Hey, Jackson Kennedy had 4 field goals too.
Yeah,
that was big.
I was going to say, I think for the first time, people were like, we got a kicker, which isn't something that teams usually look for, but it's like, oh, our special teams, like we're not missing kicks. This is great for us. The one thing I will say though is still the rush defense. Cal still ran the ball all over Syracuse.
Well, first off, if you picked Jackson Kennedy to be your pick to click last week, you made some money.
That's absolutely true. The stat that I found, most field goals by a Syracuse kicker on the road since 2017.
Wow.
So how about that?
That's a good stat. But yes, the run defense better, but not great. It got outshined though. Look, you're never going to play perfect, right? And I think this was as perfect as Syracuse could play, to be honest with you, because the offense looked good. They could do it in all.
And the trenches
look
really good. Offensive and defensive lines look really good.
Yes, totally. And the run defense wasn't great, but it was better. And that's all we want to see is improvement, especially a Cal team that's honestly been pretty good this year. If you look at their losses, very minimal to opponents. Obviously, a blown lead against Miami, which that was an incredible game.
Yeah, but I mean, like a couple points go one way or the other, or some other teams don't get a last push. I mean, we're looking at a Cal team that could have potentially 3 or 4 more wins on the season.
Right. So we got UConn this weekend. I think spirits are high. Which it could be a trap game. But I think
I think they got this one. So I think BC was a trap game.
It's a gritty Huskies team.
Right. I think you can write UConn off as a win. Now the game of the year, Miami, 3:30, ESPN, Dome. This is huge, not only for Syracuse to get into a better bowl game, but to knock Miami's chances from the playoffs off. This is a huge game for Syracuse football.
This is one of those games that Cal McCord has experience doing this last year, right? Mm-hmm. You gear up all season to play Michigan. Now, you play some tough opponents along the way, and you may not win every single game, but you're thinking about Michigan all season. This is that game for Syracuse. Miami is an extremely tough opponent at the end of the year. Maybe they're not as good as they were 2 or 3 weeks ago on paper, but this game is going to show how the first season went overall, I think. If they get blown out by Miami, the season was good, but it wasn't great. if they compete with Miami for 3 to 4 quarters,
100%.
that's a huge finish to the season. And I'm not even talking about the bowl game because I don't know how that's going to go anymore in the nature of college football.
I think, well, the Pitt game is the only one on paper you can look at and you say that was the only big blowout that Syracuse was not competitive in. The thing that stands out about that Miami game, and the funny is Reese Davis said it on College Game Day this past week, in November, you're either playing for something or you're playing to spoil something.
Right.
And the funny thing is, you have Syracuse and Miami, it's the same thing on both ends. Syracuse trying to spoil Miami's party because there's so much chaos at the top of the ACC. And with Miami losing to Georgia Tech a couple weeks ago, that just adds a whole other layer of chaos into the fold. But Miami and then Miami, or Syracuse on the other end, or Miami on the other end, I should say, really trying to sneak in any way they potentially can. Mm-hmm. Now, I will say, they don't really control they kind of control their own destiny, so they really have to just win out in order to make sure that they can put themselves in a position to be in that ACC championship.
Yeah, so 2 great football games coming up in the next 2 weeks. More importantly, Keon Anthony commits to Syracuse basketball, who is 3-0 so far, but took it to double overtime to win against Youngstown State. I said
Syracuse basketball will be 3-2 by the end of this week. Let's just start there.
Yeah, I don't think you either lose very badly to Texas or you just lose to Texas. I don't think there's any way you beat Texas. This team does not looking like a 3-0 team.
It's a new squad. You have plenty of new players. They have to figure out how to play together. Also, a lot of them are not playing in their spots that they were at their prior schools. Jair Davis, for example, at Delaware, did not play in the same role.
Yeah, but he didn't even play that much against Youngstown State.
It's all about the first half.
I guess I was just talking about the first few games as a whole. But, we'll see what happens. The Anthony thing, real quick, though, to touch on that. Yeah. Huge. Absolutely huge.
Changes the program.
And I'm not even talking about skill set as a player. I'm talking about branding. I'm talking about NIL. I'm talking about recognition. I'm talking about national TV games. That one guy committing to this school brings in a boatload of eyes and really money, if you want to look at it that way. It's an exciting time. It's an exciting time for Syracuse. Once he steps foot on campus, it's a lot of good things.
I think Cayenne should have committed like a week later, so that way once Syracuse loses both these games, there's at least a little icing on the cake, or there's at least a little light at the end of the tunnel.
Syracuse fans are still happy.
Right.
Well, exciting stuff in the Syracuse world right here. Very exciting, because after the break, we will be joined by Kenny Albert right when we come back. We'll see you right after break.
Don't miss the Kyle McCord.
You want to put the book out in front?
Yeah, I was going to
put it on display.
That'd be awesome.
I was going to say we could have it in front of us.
Clutch.
Oh, yeah. Center that up. Perfect.
Sweet.
Product placement.
Do you have this? Yeah. Bring him on now.
We can bring him on now. Hey, Kenny, we got you?
Hi, guys. You got me?
Hey, got you. Can you hear us all right?
Good. Yeah. How's everybody?
Sweet. We're doing well. We got this front and center, by the way.
We made sure we had the product placement.
I see. That's great. Great product placement. Appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah. We'll get into that here in a minute. I know we'll be on break for a couple seconds, but where are you at? Where are you at right now? And what's on tap for the week?
I'm home right now. We're actually calling a couple of the Rangers games during this West Coast road trip from the studio in New York City. So game late tonight and Thursday. I'm in Philadelphia tomorrow for a Flyers Hurricanes game, and then Lions Colts this Sunday in Indianapolis.
How do you? I'm just going to ask this, right away. How do you balance it all in a given week, especially this time of year where you're doing a multitude of things every week?
Yeah, this is actually a pretty easy week because there's not as much travel as usual.
True.
The last couple of weeks have been pretty crazy with 4 or 5 flights, but this week staying somewhat close is for this time of year pretty easy, actually.
So for the So you said you're doing the Rangers remotely, at least for these couple games. How different is that, calling a game that's not actually live, but you're doing it through a screen? I know you had experience doing it this past summer for the TV stuff, but this has got to be a little bit different, I would think, for hockey.
Right. It's definitely a little different. We don't do it that often, but for a couple of road trips out west, that's the way we do it. And I think hockey, compared to the other sports, hockey and basketball are probably easier than some of the other sports to do off a monitor. So you still might not see certain things that are going on, either a delayed penalty back behind the play, or you might not see if the goalie's pulled right away. But for the most part, as long as the teams have good numbers, I've been in some situations where the uniform numbers aren't that great, so it gets a little tricky. But for the most part, it's
nice.
And just to clarify, you're calling those radio off the monitor, right? Comparative to TV, when you would call that for the Olympics.
right. The two this week are radio, and then in person tomorrow for the Flyers, Hurricanes, and then the Colts, Lions is in Indianapolis on Sunday.
Sweet.
Very cool. I know you're not traveling a lot this week, but what's your favorite city to travel to?
I have a lot of favorite cities. Always love going to Chicago. It's a great sports city, great restaurants, hotels. Warm weather cities are always fun, especially in the winter. Some of the Canadian cities, Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto. So I have a lot of them. A lot of favorite cities.
So does that mean United Center might be your favorite, I guess, road venue? I know you get to work at Madison Square Garden every single day, so that seems like, the Mecca. But I guess, what's I guess the secondary one to that?
Yeah, no, there's a bunch of them. Always love Lambeau Field, Wrigley Field, Fenway, some of the historic venues. I judge a lot of it by the location of the broadcast booth. So if we're in a good spot,
yeah,
then it's a good venue for me.
Nice. All right, we'll be back in just a few seconds, and we'll get you on, Kenny.
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
ESPN Syracuse sports talk shows on QSportsTalk.com. Tomorrow's broadcasting stars today, broadcasting live from the campus of Syracuse University. This is Newhouse Afternoon.
Rolling along here on Newhouse Afternoon. Max Gifford, Dylan Beyer, Nico Horning, glad to be with you this afternoon. And it's time for part dukes of our special guest doubleheader. And now we bring on Kenny Albert, the only sportscaster calling games in all four professional and for all major professional sports with the NHL, the NFL, MLB, NBA. Kenny, thanks so much for taking the time. We really appreciate you hopping on to join us. I'll start here, though, because, everyone's attention normally goes to the four major sports you call. But one of the coolest things I think that you got to do this summer was call water polo. And I think, you almost have two reactions, because you're calling all these major professional sports. You go, how is Kenny Albert calling water polo? But then when you're listening to the water polo games, you go, oh my gosh, Kenny Albert's calling water polo. This is great.
Well, first of all, I appreciate you having me on. Great to be with you guys. Water polo was a lot of fun. It was a new sport for me. As you mentioned, I'm heavily involved in the four major sports, football and hockey for the most part, and then some basketball, some baseball throughout the year. But I have been assigned in past Olympics to work some other sports, track and field, volleyball, and in this case, this past summer, water polo, a sport that I didn't really know much about, but spent a lot of time studying and learning, and I had some great partners around me. We were calling it off monitors up in Stamford, Connecticut, so it was a little different than being at the Olympics in person in Paris, but it was a lot of fun, and I was so glad that I had the opportunity to add another sport to my list.
So now that you're years into your career, obviously, and you've done it all, what's the drive at this point to kind of keep it going? I know it was a dream for you. We got the book right here. But what does it feel like to be in the moment now versus maybe earlier on in your career when you're still doing everything?
Well, I think the key is I never feel like I'm going to work. Yes, there's a lot of work and a lot of travel involved, especially this time of the year when I'm involved in three sports that overlap. Last week, for example, I called a basketball game on Friday, a football game on Sunday, hockey earlier in the week. I have 3 hockey games this week, football game on the weekend. So there's a lot of preparation involved. You have to be really organized. I have a checklist that I go through before each and every game that involves watching prior games, doing a lot of reading, preparing charts, going through statistics and many other materials, going to coach press conferences, meeting with players and coaches. So there's a lot that goes into it, but there's really nothing else I would rather be doing. It's so much fun to be able to go and call games at the various venues, throughout North America. Just last week, I had games at Madison Square Garden, an Avalanche game at Ball Arena in Denver, Knicks game at MSG, a football game in New Orleans, hockey game in Philadelphia tomorrow. I have the Detroit Lions, one of the top teams in the NFL, this Sunday, so it never really gets old.
That's awesome. Well, the first sentence, I think, in your introduction was, I've never worked a day in my life, and I think that was such a cool beginning to the book.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have been lucky enough to read the book. I was going to, Nico, you got to put it out front, the product placement here. This is Kenny's book, A Mic for All Seasons. Just came out a little while ago, Kenny. For me, it was a fantastic read because it drew on all your experiences doing all these different sports. But I think one of the things that kind of stood out was sort of the beginning of your career and the fact that not many people probably know you worked in the American Hockey League with the Baltimore Skipjacks, and then obviously working up to the Rangers and doing all these major professional sports. I guess, a question we like to ask a lot of guests on this show, if you could go back to, a time when you were really young, you were calling Skipjacks games. I mean, what advice would you give to your, I guess, your former self at this time?
Right. Great question. Really would not have done anything differently. I was so fortunate to get hired by the Skipjacks back in 1990. I was just out of college, and my goal was to do hockey play-by-play on the radio. And I was hired by a minor league team at the highest level of the minor leagues in a big city, Baltimore. And I was hired primarily to do the radio broadcast, but also to chip in so many other areas: public relations, marketing, sales, go pick up a player at the airport, really whatever they needed. But I learned so much about what it took to run a professional sports franchise, and got to do the 82 games a season, getting the reps on play-by-play, many of the games with color analysts, and many I worked solo. So those were 2 years that I would not have traded in for anything. And the advice that I give to a lot of young broadcasters, high school, college students like yourself, and there's a chapter in the book titled Paying It Forward, because I do love talking to young broadcasters and giving advice. And I always tell people, do as much as you can, even if it's not the exact area that you hope to get into, whether it's play-by-play, color, sideline reporting, studio host, interviews like what you guys are doing, even behind the scenes, working as a producer, a director, a statistician. The more experience you get, the better, whether it's an internship, a job at a college radio station, college TV station, etc. There are so many more opportunities out there now than when I was your age. The internet didn't even exist, believe it or not, when I was in college. So and you, my friends and I who worked in the sports department at the radio station, we had a fight for airtime with the music department, with the DJs. These days, you can go broadcast a game and put it out there on the web. So if you're passionate about it, and I'm sure all of you are, about working in this business, and you guys are all off to a great start doing what you're doing at one of the best schools in the nation as far as journalism and broadcasting. If you know where to look, whether it's for an internship or any other area that you're able to gain experience, I think you're ahead of the game.
So often we ask our role models who their role models were, and your dad, the great Marv Albert, was the voice of basketball, the voice of the New York Knicks. Growing up with Marv as your dad, how did he inspire you, and what have you taken from the way he broadcasted games to your own broadcasts?
Well, first of all, it was great. Such a tremendous childhood. Growing up in my household with my parents and 2 uncles who were also broadcasters, Al and Steve. So I always joke that whenever they came over on a holiday or special occasion, I felt like I was listening to the first all-sports radio station. I would just try to learn via osmosis. Couldn't have asked for better teachers. And I didn't really know anything differently. He was my father. They were my uncles. I grew up going to games and tagging along, and when I was old enough, I would start keeping stats for him. So just the knowledge that I was able to soak in, and when I started keeping stats for him at 15 or 16 years old, just having the experience of sitting in the broadcast booth, listening to the communication between the announcers and the production truck, it was just invaluable. I felt like I had such a head start on anybody else my age who might not be able to get experience until they went off to college.
Kenny Albert here with us on Newhouse Afternoon with Max Gifford, Dylan Beyer. I'm Nico Horning. We'll step aside for just a couple of minutes and be back to wrap things up here on Newhouse Afternoon. Stick with us. Kenny will be back here in just a minute.
Saturday,
Sweet. So Kenny, I know a couple of minutes ago you brought up a checklist that you go through before each game. What does that look like? Are there some commonalities between each of the sports, or is there some things that differ between each sport that you're preparing for?
It's pretty similar. To be honest, I have it right here on the phone. I'll pull it up. So,
oh, sweet.
So the football checklist, the first time I have a team every year, there's a little more that goes into it. Once you have a team repeat times, you've done some of the work already. So I go through each team's media guide. You're not reading every word, but you're kind of scanning through, looking for notes on each player. I go through each team's weekly press release that they send out. I read the newspaper clips every day from both cities for about a week leading up to the game. I watch the last game, go through the stats that the league sends out. I go through my own files, which I have here, where I clip articles. And I also take out my past charts from the previous time that I had that team. So I have Detroit Indy this week. So it's not nearly complete, but I started last night putting my charts together. So that's the Indianapolis offense, Indianapolis defense, and then Detroit on the other side. And I go through the depth chart, put the players in at their positions. And then I haven't had either team this year, so I went back to last year, my personal charts from when I had these teams, and transferred some of the information over. And then I'll add everything else in during the week with all the new info. This is also not complete, but this is for tonight's hockey game, Rangers Canucks. So it's pretty similar.
Nice.
Not as much prep for hockey because the teams are playing all the time. You're seeing a lot of their games. I know the Rangers so well, having worked not all their games this year, but a lot of them. For football, Detroit and Indy, I haven't done either team this year, so there's a lot more prep that goes into it.
So you're a proponent of handwriting every one of your charts, it looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. I know a lot of people do it on the computer, and I do a lot on the computer and on the iPad, research-wise, but as far as these charts, I just think you remember it so much more if you write it down. I hate hearing about people that farm it out and use a service to do theirs because it's like cheating. You're not doing your own work.
Right.
They can make mistakes, right? You're relying on somebody else to be perfect. At least if you make a mistake, it's your mistake. But I just think you remember so much more when you write it down, whether it's the name, number, stats, notes about the players. So I'm a big proponent of that. But not that I don't like technology. I do a lot with technology.
Yeah, right.
So I'm not totally old school.
Well, speaking of mistakes, I've heard from Mike Breen, he's never had a perfect broadcast. What is there a mistake that you ever made on a broadcast that has stuck with you and you're like, ooh, that one was kind of...
You're always your own toughest critic, so you're never going to be perfect, right? It's a 2 or 3 hour live telecast every time you're on the air, so you might misidentify a player or give some wrong information, and it kills you. I'll go, walk away from a game so upset if I made, I can't think of one specifically, but a mistake about a rule or about some historical fact, you wind up forgetting about it pretty quickly, but it does kill you once you realize it. So you strive for perfection, but again, it's a live broadcast, so you're never going to be perfect. I've had a couple of funny things, like I got the hiccups on the air one time, trying to reach for the cough button. You feel the hiccup coming. I wrote about a couple of them in the book. I can't remember specifics, but a couple of things like that with hiccups or misspeaking about something. A lot of times if you make some kind of a mistake, if you realize it right away and correct it, I think the viewer appreciates that, right? Instead of just leaving it out there. It shows you're human almost.
For sure.
You're not just a computer, right? We're not AI. We're not AI up in the booth. So there are going to be mistakes sometimes.
.com. Tomorrow's broadcasting stars today. Broadcasting live from the campus of Syracuse University. This is Newhouse Afternoon.
Welcome back to Newhouse Afternoon. Wrapping up shop with Kenny Albert joining us here ahead of his busy broadcast this weekend. Usually we say, one broadcast, but it's broadcast plural with Kenny Albert.
It's always broadcast.
Max Gifford, Dylan Beyer, and I'm Nico Horning here with you. Kenny, I know we've talked about the book a little bit. As far as the future of sports broadcasting, and obviously we're college students ourselves trying to crack into this in the future, where do you see things going, whether it's TV, streaming, radio, and maybe play-by-play opportunities and sports talk radio? Where do you see it all going in the next several years?
Well, I think the great thing about sports, Nico, is it's the best reality TV, right? Live games, you never know what's going to happen. So I think there's always going to be the need for broadcasts, right? Play-by-play announcers, color analysts, hosts. Sports talk has exploded, obviously, over the last 30 years. WFAN in New York was the first all-sports radio station in 1987. Just think, how many thousands and thousands and millions of jobs have been created in the world of sports broadcasting since WFAN came on the air that first day. Podcasts, various types of shows on the internet, on streaming services. It's not going away because sports are just as popular as they've ever been. And you see the rights fees going up with all of the sports leagues. So for the three of you, just keep on doing what you're doing. And I know we'll be seeing you along the way and hopefully sharing a broadcast booth with you someday.
Kenny, that really means a lot, and again, we really appreciate you joining us. I'm kind of a dinosaur of the group because I'm still a huge avid reader. It's the reason I read your book. I still get the hard copies of the book. I'm not a huge, I'm not a huge audiobook guy. I'm not a huge, read it off your phone. So I guess as the avid reader of the group, I have to ask, even though you just called your 500th game at Fox a little while ago, and you still sound so good in every broadcast you do. I mean, could we potentially be getting a sequel of the Kenny Albert book?
Well, I appreciate it, Max. It was a lot of fun writing it. A Mike for All Seasons. It was published about a year ago and really started it during the pandemic, and felt like I had a lot of stories to tell. From my birth when I was 3 months premature, 1 pound, 15 ounces, spent 2.5 months in the hospital, on to my days learning from family members, and then a big break in high school when I started doing games for Cox Cable on Long Island. They happened to show up at my high school to film a girls' basketball game, and I volunteered to announce the game and wound up working the next 2.5 years for them. And then the college days, Baltimore Skipjacks, and then on to the professional career. So I've started to keep a list in my phone of potential stories that I would want to include in a sequel. I'm not sure that I'll have enough material for about 10 years, but you never know down the line. Hopefully I'll have the opportunity to write another book, but I appreciate you reading it. And I think for your viewers and listeners, it can be used as sort of a textbook for high school and college students who would like to get into broadcasting. I tell a lot of stories about the various analysts I've worked with, the different sports that I've been involved in, stories about travel and some crazy situations that I've been in, a chapter about the COVID years and how we did broadcast during that time, and then the chapter paying it forward, like I mentioned. So again, appreciate that you read it, but I really think that college students in particular, those involved and interested in broadcasting, can hopefully get a lot out of it.
Speaking of moments, I know you've written a lot of stories in the book, but you've called a lot of games. Are there a couple moments that really stand out to you that you had to call personally? One of my favorite calls is your Jose Bautista home run, no doubt about it, and then you let the crowd speak. And that was in an age where I was really curious with the voice of sport. What stands out to you with the minute left that we have here in the show?
It's ironic. I've done probably fewer baseball games than definitely than the other three sports. It's probably on par with basketball, but that's the call that I get asked about the most often. The Bautista home run bat flip back in 2015. There are so many calls in hockey. The Rangers winning the Cup in '94. I was on the call for NHL radio. 2 of the last 3 years working the Stanley Cup on the TV side. Olympic hockey, gold medal games. In football, too many to go through here in the time that we have. A lot of them are written about in the book. One that stands out just 2 years ago, the crazy laterals at the end of the New England-Las Vegas game and the Chandler Jones interception, turned for a touchdown with no time on the clock. But, just so fortunate to be involved in as many sports as I have been through the years, and it's led to a lot of certainly memorable moments.
Well, Kenny, we appreciate you jumping on here, and good luck the rest of the way. Good luck tonight with the call, and we'll be talking soon.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on. Dylan, Nico, Max, good luck in your careers. Hopefully we can do this again. And
thank you, Kenny.
Stay in touch and really enjoyed our chat.
Will do. Thanks,
Great.
Kenny. Best of luck going forward. This hour of Newhouse Afternoon powered by Drivers Village Cicero. Go to dvoffers.com for more info. Well, that wraps it up. For Max Gifford, Dylan Beyer, I'm Nico Horning here on our last Newhouse Afternoon show. We'll be back at some point in the future. Thanks so much.
The Sports Show with Coach